have much planned for you today as far as a speech, but if I can go ahead and start, and then maybe the other parents can fill in. But sick people are not criminals. Sick people should not be deported to other states just because they have an illness. In addition to the 21 states plus DC, there are 13 states with pending legislation for allowing non-psychoactive cannabis oil, merely the possession of it. This is life-saving cannabis oil, so that parents and patients are protected from criminalization. We had a much anticipated meeting with Governor Branstad today. Hello.
Let her set up.
Sure. We're taking it really informal today since there's no senators. We do have the mayor. All right. We met with the governor this morning, and he was extremely gracious, and he mainly listened to our concerns and the hardships that we Iowans have had to deal with our medically fragile patients. He did express compassion, and he expressed an openness to help us, provided we can find a way that this does not increase abuse. We have explained that the potential for abuse is limited with low THC oil, for which the other 13 states are pursuing such legislation. Branstad agreed to call the governor of both Utah and Alabama, with whom he is friends with both of them, and both have passed legislation. The governor of Alabama is expected to sign their cannabis oil decriminalization bill very soon. He also mentioned that the governor of Alabama is a doctor and that Utah is a leader in healthcare, so he would be willing to explore what they have been pursuing. Our children have run out of options. We know that this oil is helping children in other states right now. I personally have had to leave the state for non-FDA approved medications such as steroids and immunoglobulins that I was unable to obtain in Iowa, but at least I was allowed to return to my home and my business and my family and friends. We want freedom from persecution for trying to prolong our children's lives. And that's all I have, other than I'm very, very grateful. One legislator from the House sat in our meeting today, and we're hopeful that this might get done yet this year.
Who's the legislator?
Rob Taylor.
On Monday, the governor was asked about oil, and his answer sort of illustrated that he didn't understand you were seeking oil instead of the grass. Is that part of it? Did you talk to him about the actual oil versus?
Right. I think he has not seen any legislation in Iowa yet, so he's not sure what exactly is being proposed. And honestly, as patients, we're not quite sure yet either. We're just still hopeful that something will get done. But I think there was a little bit of a explanation process that happened this morning.
Yeah, we explained to him that it's so low in THC that, you know, that he shouldn't be concerned about potential drug abuse if someone were to get access to this. And that's when we suggested when Utah and Alabama passed it, and he said, great, I know them both very well, and I've got a lot of confidence in them, I'd like to call them.
You're a mayor. You have people come to you with problems. When you left here, did you feel, what was your sense? Did you get the brush off? Did you get sort of happy talk that I'll look into this, but it's not going to happen? Or
No.
do you think sincerely you got to?
We sincerely got, he's very concerned about our children. He doesn't want to have us move away, and I think he has a lot better understanding now of at least this interim legislation and the potential benefit it would have to our children without the potential abuses that he's concerned about, and we all acknowledge we're concerned about it too. But by the same token, it's bad public policy to let the bad guys keep the good guys from getting what they need. And so he was very sincere, very genuine, and I think the sense was that I got that he feels more comfortable now talking about it with two governors in two states that he has a lot of confidence in.
Are you leaving here more hopeful?
Yes. And we've been contacted by legislators both in the Senate and the House on both sides of the aisle that are all working on this interim legislation. So there's clearly bipartisan support to figure out how to get something done like that. And the governor said, look, I'd like to look at legislation. I'm not going to sit here and say one way or the other. He said, I'm going to keep an open mind. I'd like to look at the actual legislation. If the legislature wants to push this legislation this year, I'd like to see what it actually says.
Is the Alabama bill similar to what you described on Iowa Press, in that it would sort of allow you to go to another state to get the pill with the oil derivative or however?
Yes, it's very
Okay.
similar. It's called Carly's Law, which ironically, Utah's bill is called Carly's Law. There's a lot of Carly's born a few years ago. Oh yeah, Utah was Charlie's. And Alabama is Carly's.
Oh.
And Alabama allows possession. There's no manufacturing in the state, but it allows possession of the oil. Parents will not be criminalized. And I think they have a THC limit of 3%. There might be a little bit more flexibility with their,
But that's what you'd like to see, is
Yes.
oil that you could buy out of state, prescribed by an Iowa doctor, and you'd obtain it out of state.
Correct.
Right, and not be persecuted when coming back.
even if a medical cannabis bill passed this year for producing it, it would take at least a year to set up the infrastructure anyway. So this would buy us precious time to obtain the bills. That's my son right now.
And with a small subset of patients in epilepsy. I mean, that's a nice small, I mean, obviously we don't want to be selfish and not look at cancer and not look at other illnesses. However, this would be a nice subset of people to work with.
Okay, so that's what you're talking about, is a narrow focus with just epileptic patients.
Yeah, for now, and that's why 12 states are doing it in the interim. We recognize that this is a more comprehensive program, but in the interim, that there's no downside
You're
to
saying
it.
that 21 states allow this oil now?
21 states have a medical cannabis program.
Right.
And that is including Washington DC. And,
Oh, okay.
and then if you add New York's executive order to that, it could be 22
Oh, I see.
states.
Yeah, and if you look at the interim legislation of these 12 states, I think Alabama, it passed unanimously in the Senate and the House. And as the Governor Branstad said, the governor of Alabama is a doctor, and he said, I'm going to sign it. If you look at Utah, I mean, so the legislature, they understand this issue and say, we need to move this forward to help these families in the interim.
So Alabama is considering it, and Utah has approved it, or what?
Alabama has passed both the House and Senate. It's sitting on the governor's desk, and he's said he will sign it.
And this is medical oil.
Right. And from the news reports, they said it was a unanimous vote, both in the House and the
And
Senate.
Utah has done the same thing, and that's pending in Utah, or are they signed?
Signed.
Yeah, the governor signed it.
Similar law approved. in-
I have a form for you if you want that
Sure.
spells it out. If that one.
I guess, I'm assuming you know this answer, but are there doctors in Iowa who would prescribe it? If you get that.
Well, yes and no. Doctors cannot actually prescribe something that is federally Schedule 1, but they can recommend it. So it's, what other states are doing is they're calling it a recommendation. Both Dr. Aldasari, who is a neurologist that my son sees, and Dr. Joshi, who my son is also seeing, are very supportive of medical cannabis, and they're very well-respected neurologists.
They understand prescription, it's a recommendation. I
It's
think
a
we've been all referring to prescription.
It's kind of a generic term,
Okay.
so you're, as a writer, you want to get your facts straight, I would probably say recommendation.
They understand that, parents with children of these, rare forms of epilepsy are on such severe medications with such severe side effects. For example, one of the ones that my daughter Quinn is on,
Your April?
yes, causes permanent vision loss, among other things. And she's not on as many as some children are. So they understand that parents are willing to look at non-FDA approved, methods to help with the pain. And the medical cannabis has none of those side effects of these FDA approved drugs. And I think that that's a misconception that we did discuss with the governor and that he was very open to listening to today. And so I think that's the big thing, is the stigma around it. It seems to be what's hurting the cause more than anything.
And we recognize that an average FDA trial is 12 years, and we said we're happy for them to trial it, but if our doctors suggest our kids ought to get access to it, let them have access to it. Margaret she's on a non-FDA approved drug today, who they say is medically necessary for Dravet syndrome, but they're still studying it. She was on a non-FDA approved drug for that recently was approved. So we acknowledge that let the FDA study it, but if our doctors think our children ought to go on it, let us go on it now, while it's being studied like other medications.
How long was the meeting?
I'd say half an hour.
And how many people were there then?
Probably 15 to 20.
Right,
So not everybody, some of the people left.
right.
Right.
And again, this was scheduled for
Parents and
15
children.
minutes, so
My husband-
he gave us extra time because he was genuinely interested in all these issues.
Just so I understand, you could go to another state with a doctor's recommendation and get,
Most of our children see doctors that are out of state. His primary neurologist at this point is in Minnesota, because Iowa's doctors are general neurologists, and so when you have a very rare condition, many times they recommend that you leave the state anyway. So,
To an epileptologist.
Right. We go to Anne Marie Children's Hospital in Chicago.
So you go to Mayo.
What's your baby's name?
Quinn, Quinn.
It's a little girl.
Little girl, yep.
How old is she?
She's 21 months.
You guys are from Riverside?
Yes.
Quincy's loud in church too.
So where do things go from here now?
Well,
Kind of
we
up to the-
believe
the
there's,
legislature.
right, there's draft in the Senate, and we don't want to say something that we can't back up, but we predict that the House will have, do they call that mirror legislation? That hopefully the same legislation will be in the House and Senate, and in the next 2 weeks will be approved, so they can go home and campaign, and we will vote for them since they helped us.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your coverage. We would be nowhere without the press.